Marcus Webb was 38 years old when his wife of 6 years decided she had outgrown him, without stopping to wonder who, exactly, had been holding up the ceiling she was standing on. He drove a 2016 Ford F-150 with 112,000 miles on it. He wore work boots to the grocery store. His wife's friends called him Blue-Collar Marcus, and she never corrected them. Not once. Not in 6 years. What she did instead was invite a man named Damian Strauss into their life. A man with polished shoes, a leased Porsche, and the kind of confidence that belonged to people who had never actually built anything with their hands. She had been doing it quietly for 11 months before the Thursday afternoon Marcus received a rental application for a unit in his own building. The applicant's name was Damian Strauss. The requested unit was the Penthouse. Monthly rent listed, $4,800. Marcus read the form twice. He set it down. His hands did not shake. What Vanessa had never thought to ask, not in 6 years of marriage, was what her husband actually owned, because she had only ever seen the truck, the boots, and the modest apartment they shared in Decatur. She had never once asked whose name was on the deed to the building where she met her new man for Tuesday evenings. What happened next would cost Damian Strauss $4,800. A signed lease, a public humiliation, and every illusion he had carried into that elevator. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning started the way most of Marcus Webb's mornings did. Coffee, black, no sugar, poured while the Atlanta sky was still a dark shade of gray-blue. He stood at the window of the Decatur apartment, the smaller one, the one Vanessa knew about, and watched the lights in the building across the road blinking on one by one as people started their days. He had always found that particular sight settling. All those separate lives, all that invisible effort. He respected effort above most things. The apartment was modest by design. Vanessa liked to tell her friends they were building toward something, which was a phrase she used to mean that Marcus was not there yet. He let her say it. He had learned, early and well, that silence was its own kind of strategy. He owned a small property management company called Webb Development, a name that appeared on utility filings, insurance documents, and the deeds to 12 buildings in the metro Atlanta area, none of which Vanessa had ever asked about specifically. She knew he did real estate stuff. That was the phrase she used to her friends at dinner parties. Real estate stuff. As if it were a hobby, like coin collecting or woodworking, something a man kept in a garage and nobody needed to take seriously. His grandmother, Lorraine Webb, had told him once when he was 17 years old and trying too hard to impress a girl who was not paying attention, "Marcus, let your work be the loudest thing about you. Your mouth does not have to say a word." She had been dead 11 years by the time Vanessa tossed her photograph in a box destined for the storage unit during a living room reorganization. Marcus had retrieved the photo quietly, without comment. He kept it now on his desk at the office she had never visited. He had met Vanessa Holloway at an industry mixer in downtown Atlanta 7 years ago. She was in marketing, sharp and social, with a laugh that filled the room before she did. She had a way of making you feel like the center of something. Marcus was not, by nature, a man who needed to feel like the center of anything, but he had allowed himself to enjoy it for a season. They dated 8 months before he proposed. He bought the ring with cash and kept the receipt in a folder he labeled simply, Vanessa. That was the kind of man he was. The kind who kept records. The marriage had been good. For a time, she decorated the apartment in ways that made it feel warm. She was organized and ambitious, and she remembered the names of his business contacts at gatherings, which he appreciated. But somewhere around the 3rd year, something in her manner had shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but the way a building settles over time. The micro cracks were there long before you saw the damage in the walls. She had started keeping her phone face down on the kitchen counter. He noticed. He said nothing. There was a second coffee mug in the dish rack that Tuesday morning, wide-rimmed, cream-colored, not one of theirs. Vanessa came into the kitchen in her robe, kissed his cheek with the practiced ease of someone performing a habit, and said she had a long day ahead and would be home late. She smelled of a perfume he did not recognize, not new exactly, familiar in the way something becomes familiar when you have been around it for some time and only just recognized what you were smelling. He nodded. He finished his coffee. He picked up his company phone on the way out the door and saw that Patricia Elkins at the leasing office had forwarded him a rental application for Unit 1401, the Penthouse, received the afternoon before. He sat in his truck for 2 full minutes before he opened it. The name on the application read Damian Strauss. Marcus set his phone face down on the seat, started the engine, and pulled slowly into traffic. Some rooms, his grandmother used to say, reveal themselves when the time is right. He arrived at the web development office on Peachtree Industrial just after 8. The office was a converted row house, 2 desks, a filing room, and a back office, where Marcus kept the records that governed 12 properties and several hundred tenant relationships. Patricia was already at her desk, mid-50s, precise, with the kind of professional loyalty that money alone could not purchase. She said, "You saw the application. It was not a question." Marcus set his bag down. "I saw it." He called the listing number directly, said someone gave him the number, said he was looking for a furnished month-to-month situation, high floor, private entrance if possible. Someone gave him the number, Marcus repeated, not for Patricia's benefit, but for his own. He took the application into the back office and closed the door. Damian Strauss, 34 years old, occupation listed as financial consultant. Previous address in Buckhead. References included a woman named Helena Rourke and a business entity called Strauss Ventures LLC. Income documentation, insufficient by Web Development's own stated standard, but whoever had directed him to this listing had likely told him that part would not be a problem. Marcus opened his laptop. His hands did not shake. He typed the name into 3 separate search databases. He ran the previous address. He pulled the Buckhead lease records. Damian Strauss had vacated the Buckhead apartment 14 months ago, meaning he had been without a fixed long-term address for over a year, cycling through short-term furnished rentals and extended hotel stays. He was a man in motion, the kind of motion that required someone else's stability to orbit around. Marcus leaned back in his chair and thought about things. He thought about the Tuesday evenings when Vanessa worked late. The Thursday afternoons that had been yoga, then stopped being yoga, then became errands without further specification. He thought about the weekend 3 months prior when she had gone to visit her sister in Marietta and returned with a tan line that did not match the weather. He opened his company's building access logs. Every unit at 1401 Peachtree Tower was equipped with a smart access system, keypad entry with logged timestamps, a system Marcus had installed himself in 2021 as a building-wide upgrade. He scrolled back 14 months. The common area lobby logs showed guest access cards activated from the building front desk. He filtered by usage frequency. One guest access card had been activated 26 times over 14 months. The card was registered to V-Web. Tenant notation, owner's household representative. He had given Vanessa that card years ago during a renovation, when contractors needed supervision and he was traveling. He had never asked for it back. 26 visits, 2 to 4 hours each. Unit 802, a furnished two-bedroom on the 8th floor he kept vacant between long-term tenants. The last logged access, the previous Tuesday evening. The same Tuesday Vanessa had been working late. He moved with the same deliberate calm that defined all his actions. He forwarded the access logs to his personal email. He exported the guest card records to a file and saved it to a thumb drive from his desk drawer. He photographed the application with his company phone, time-stamped. There was no need to hurry. Hurrying was what people did when they had not prepared properly, and Marcus Webb had been preparing his entire adult life without knowing for exactly what. By noon, he had cross-referenced the access logs against 14 months of Vanessa's stated whereabouts and documented 31 discrepancies. He found $6,200 in transfers from their joint account to a contact in Vanessa's known phone records, a number matching the cell listed on Damian Strauss's application, labeled only as D. $6,200. His money, moving from their account to a man who had just applied to rent his penthouse. He sat still for a long time. Then he opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it 1401. He picked up his phone and called one number. It rang twice. "Phyllis," he said, "I need to see you this afternoon." She heard something in his voice. She had known him long enough to understand what that particular tone meant. "I'll move my 3 o'clock," she said. Marcus hung up and sat for one more moment in the quiet of his own office, in a building the woman he married did not know he owned, thinking about what it meant to spend 6 years beside someone who had never once asked the right questions. Real power, his grandmother had told him, operated in quiet rooms. Phyllis Drummond had been Marcus's attorney for 9 years. She was 61, silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of practice that had processed every variation of marital deception the city of Atlanta could produce. Her office sat on the 14th floor downtown, with a clear view of the skyline behind her desk. She had built her career on a single operating principle: documentation outlasted emotion every time. Marcus laid everything on her desk in sequence: the application, the access logs, the Zelle transfer history, the cross-referenced discrepancy report. He did not explain. He let her read. She read for 11 minutes without speaking. "He applied to rent your own penthouse," she said finally. He did. She set her glasses down. 14 months, 31 documented discrepancies, 6,000 in transfers. That's what's in the joint account. I haven't looked further yet. Phyllis nodded once, slowly. Georgia is an equitable distribution state. Any marital waste, funds diverted during the marriage to support an extramarital relationship, can be recaptured in full. We can also argue fraudulent misrepresentation on the joint account withdrawals. She paused. How much of the portfolio does she know about? She knows I'm in property management. She's never asked about the portfolio specifically. Then she doesn't know about the trust. No, Phyllis allowed herself a short, measured exhale. The trust shields everything, Marcus. If she files first and tries to claim marital asset entitlement on the portfolio, she is going to hit a wall she cannot see coming. She folded her hands. You have time. Don't move yet. Let me get the structure in order. And don't touch the joint account. He drove home that afternoon and kissed Vanessa's cheek when she came into the kitchen. She asked if he wanted chicken or fish. He said chicken. He ate. He answered her questions about the day. She told a story about a difficult client. He listened. He asked one follow-up question, the kind that proved you were paying attention. She had no idea. 3 days passed. On a Saturday morning while Vanessa slept, Marcus drove 40 minutes north to his uncle's house in Roswell, Leonard Webb, 67, retired from 22 years with the Army Corps of Engineers. A man who kept his tools organized and his opinions precise. Leonard had known Marcus since he was 6 years old and had been one of the first people Marcus called when he started the company. They sat on the back porch with coffee and no particular urgency. Leonard listened to everything without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the older man was quiet for a full minute. "She sent him to your building," Leonard said. "She gave him my leasing line." Leonard set his mug down. "She wanted him inside your building, on your rent, while she was deciding whether to leave." He looked at Marcus steadily. "She wasn't just playing around, she was positioning. She was trying to build something, just not with you." Marcus looked out at the yard. Leonard kept a vegetable garden along the far fence, tomatoes coming in heavy, pole beans climbing their stakes, squash spreading wide and unhurried along the ground. Everything deliberate, everything tended. "Your grandmother used to say something about people who try to build on another man's foundation," Leonard said. "She said it never holds." Leonard picked up his mug again. "Let Phyllis do what Phyllis does. And don't let him move in." By the following Tuesday, Phyllis's paralegal had assembled a complete background profile on Damien Strauss. The picture was methodical and familiar. A man who cycled through relationships with women who had assets, contributed charm in exchange for financial access, and relocated before legal consequence caught up. There had been a prior civil complaint in Fulton County, filed by a woman named Teresa Owens, a licensed real estate agent who alleged Strauss had used her professional credentials to facilitate a fraudulent lease application. Settled out of court. No admission of liability. A pattern, nonetheless. Strauss Ventures LLC, the entity listed on the rental application, was a single-member company registered in Delaware with no filed operating agreements, no substantive business history, and a registered agent address matching a UP store in Buckhead. The financial consultant designation was aspirational at best. Phyllis prepared the evidence file with her characteristic thoroughness: access logs, transfer records, background documentation, the Fulton County civil complaint. She also prepared the formal response to the rental application, a standard denial letter citing income verification insufficiency. Clean, professional, routine in its language, and devastating in its timing. Marcus signed the denial letter. The weekend before the reckoning, he went to the building alone. He rode the elevator to the 14th floor and walked the penthouse without turning on the lights. 1,800 square feet, floor-to-ceiling glass on the south face, a travertine floor he had sourced from a dealer in Florence, Georgia, a terrace he had refinished himself, board by board, one summer 3 years ago. He had purchased the building 11 years prior, when it was a failing mid-rise with occupancy under 40%, and he had renovated it floor by floor over 4 years, every upgrade his decision, every contract reviewed from this same back office. Unit 1401 had been the last to be finished. He stood at the south window for a while and looked at the city below, all those separate lives, all that invisible effort, and he thought about what his grandmother had told him, and what his uncle had confirmed, and what 14 months of evidence had made undeniable. Preparation, Leonard had said once, was the actual work. Everything else was just timing. The appointment was set for the second Thursday of the month, Phyllis's office, 2 in the afternoon. Vanessa had been told it was a routine insurance matter related to their apartment lease, something requiring her signature as a cohabitant. She arrived in a charcoal blazer and heels, composed and confident, the way she always arrived for things she expected to manage. She did not expect to walk through the conference room door and find Damien Strauss already seated at the table. He had been summoned through a carefully worded letter from Patricia at the leasing office. a notification that his rental application required his in-person presence for resolution. He had come expecting a paperwork correction. He was wearing a navy blazer and a watch Marcus recognized as the kind that people leased along with their cars. Neither of them expected to find Marcus already seated at the head of the table, with Phyllis to his right, and a set of organized document folders placed at each chair. Vanessa stopped walking. Damien looked at Marcus, then at Vanessa, then back at Marcus. It was Vanessa who spoke first. "What is this?" "This is a meeting," Marcus said. He gestured toward the empty chairs. "Sit down." She sat. Damien sat. Phyllis opened her folder without ceremony. "Mr. Strauss," Phyllis said, "this is the formal response to your application for Unit 1401 at Peachtree Tower. You'll find it's a denial. Income verification did not meet the building's stated threshold." She slid the letter across the table. "The building's sole owner is Marcus Webb, who is also, as you appear to know, Vanessa's husband." Damien Strauss's face moved through 3 distinct expressions in 4 seconds. The third one settled and stayed. Marcus watched him without speaking. Vanessa said, "Marcus, I don't understand. Let Phyllis finish," he said. Phyllis continued. She laid out the access card logs. She laid out the cross-reference discrepancy report. She laid out the Zelle transfer history. She explained, in the precise and unhurried language of a woman who had done this for 30 years, the legal definition of marital waste under Georgia law and what recapture meant in concrete terms. She then placed the Fulton County civil complaint in front of Damien Strauss. "This is a prior filing from 2021 alleging you used another woman's professional credentials to facilitate a fraudulent lease application. It was settled quietly. It establishes a pattern. We will reference it." Damien Strauss said nothing. His jaw had tightened. His hands were flat on the table. Vanessa turned to look at him then with an expression Marcus had never seen on her face before, something very close to the recognition that she had miscounted badly. "I didn't know he owned that building," she said. Her voice had dropped to something smaller than her usual register. "You knew what building it was," Damien said, low and flat. She went quiet. Marcus waited. Then Vanessa looked across the table at him, and her eyes had shifted to something softer. The early-stage performance of regret. The opening move of a woman attempting to renegotiate terms. "Marcus," she said, "I made mistakes. I know I did. But we could." Her mother's voice came from the corner of the room. Margaret Holloway had been seated silently in a chair near the window for the past 20 minutes, invited by Marcus 3 days prior. She was 64, a retired school teacher, and she had never in 30 years said anything she had not already fully thought through. "Vanessa," she said, "don't." Vanessa turned. "He doesn't owe you a conversation," Margaret said. "You sent that man to your husband's building. You used your husband's access card. You moved his money. You don't get to ask for the thing you threw away." The room was quiet in the way rooms go quiet when the last words that needed saying have already been said. Marcus stood. He gathered his folder without hurrying. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Vanessa for a long, even moment, not with anger, not with performance, just with the calm of a man who had already finished what he came to do, and was simply noting the conclusion. "You told your friends I was blue-collar Marcus," he said. "I never corrected you either." He looked at Damien Strauss. "Your application was denied on standard grounds. If you have questions about the process, Patricia can assist you by phone during business hours." He picked up his bag. "Phyllis will be in touch regarding the divorce filings. Everything is documented. There won't be much to contest." He walked to the door. He did not look back. The hallway was quiet and cool and smelled faintly of the same coffee that building had been serving since the first time he ever walked through its lobby. He rode the elevator down alone, crossed the marble floor of the atrium, and stepped out into the afternoon sun. And for the first time in 14 months, the weight that had been living somewhere just behind his sternum was simply gone. He had not raised his voice. He had not made a single threat. He had not needed to. He was not angry. He was clear. Those were different things entirely. 7 months later, Marcus Webb was on the terrace of his building. Not the penthouse, but the third-floor unit he had converted into his own living space after the divorce was finalized. He had added a small herb garden along the south railing, rosemary and thyme, and 2 kinds of basil. And in the mornings he came out with his coffee and watched the city come awake below. The divorce had resolved in 4 months. Phyllis was thorough and the documentation was comprehensive, and there was very little Vanessa could do against 31 documented discrepancies and $6,200 in recovered marital waste. The trust held, as it had always held. Vanessa received a settlement reflecting 6 years of shared household expenses and nothing beyond. Her attorney had made several preliminary arguments and gone quiet. She was working now in marketing operations at a mid-tier firm in Dunwoody, a lateral move, the kind of repositioning that happened when a professional network found out what you had done and recalibrated its regard accordingly. 2 of her closest friends had stopped returning her calls. Her mother had not stopped. Margaret Holloway was, whatever else she was, consistent. Marcus had heard all of this through Leonard, who had heard it from a mutual acquaintance at church. He registered the information the way he registered a weather report for a city he was not planning to visit. Damian Strauss had relocated to Charlotte. There was a woman named Renee in Marcus's life now, an architect, mid-30s, with the kind of intelligence that showed up not in volume, but in the quality of her questions. The first time they sat together at dinner, she had asked what he actually built. He had told her. She had asked 2 more questions, specific ones, the kind that required real answers. He had been paying attention to her ever since. She was not performing for him. He was not performing for her. It was, he thought, the right way for things to begin. The portfolio had grown. 3 new acquisitions in the past 6 months. A ground-floor commercial conversion for a restaurant group, and a mentorship arrangement with 2 young developers from the west side of Atlanta who reminded him of himself 20 years prior. He was teaching them the things his grandmother had taught him. He was passing it forward in the only way that mattered. On a Saturday morning in late autumn, Marcus stood at the terrace railing with his coffee going cool in his hand and watched a hawk move over the rooftops below, slow and unhurried and utterly certain of where it was going. He watched it until it was gone, and then he looked out at the city he had been building inside of, quietly, for 15 years. He had built everything worth keeping. He had built it in the early mornings and the long weekends and the unremarkable Tuesdays when no one was watching. He had built it in the name of his grandmother and the patience of his uncle and the kind of faith that does not require an audience. And when the moment came, it had spoken for itself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.